This argument, and I'm going to call it an argument, has been rejected by the court itself and then by numerous and myriad international experts because of the way the Rome Statute was written. What remains an open question is, will President Trump authorize sanctions of other people within the court? Will he even potentially sanction the court itself?
Welcome to Expert Witness. I'm your host, Sundus Alsem, and our guest today is Margaret Satterthwaite, UN Special Rapporteur on the Independence of Judges and Lawyers, and a clinical law professor at New York University. She joins us from New York to discuss the latest sanctions imposed by US President Donald Trump on the International Criminal Court. Trump, on 6 February, signed an executive order sanctioning the court for its investigations into the US and its ally, Israel. Professor Satterthwaite, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to be with you today.
Thank you. First, could you please begin by explaining your mandate as a UN Special Rapporteur? What does your role entail?
Certainly. So I am the Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers. This is a position that I was appointed to by the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. It is an independent expert role, meaning that I'm neither paid nor employed by the UN. So all of my opinions and work are done entirely independently. My mandate specifically looks at the independence of the justice system. So the need for judges, lawyers, and prosecutors to enjoy an independence from political parties, from political activities, the ability to do their work without any kind of undue interference, also by economic actors, or any kind of undue interference by actors of any sort. In some countries, the issues are around political incursions. In other countries, it might be organized crime, for example. In this mandate, I also do look at international justice as well. And so I'm very concerned whenever there are incursions into the independence of international justice mechanisms as well.
Professor Satterthwaite, you've been an outspoken critic of President Donald Trump's sanctions on the ICC. Some experts have suggested that the sanctions pose an existential threat to the court, including the ICC president. Do you agree with this assessment?
So the sanctions that were authorized by the U.S. president are potentially far-ranging. He signed an executive order that authorized the relevant parts of the U.S. government to sanction individuals and or the court itself. And then he included in that order only one name so far, and that name was the chief prosecutor, Karim Khan. Now, that is not the end of the story. The authorization itself is very broad, as I said. So what remains an open question is, will President Trump authorize sanctions of other people within the court? Will he even potentially sanction the court itself? Now, I do have to say the court has survived this kind of sanctions before, specifically during the first Trump presidency. He did sanction members of the prosecution, but the concern here is that if a large number of individuals are sanctioned within the prosecution or within the court generally, or if the court itself is sanctioned, that would be a whole different story. And then I think you would start to see some very, very difficult decisions for the court in terms of how would it move forward. So I think the court is right to suggest that this could be an existential problem. It is not at this time, I don't think, an existential problem, but it is certainly a shot across the bow. And sanctioning the head prosecutor is a massive, not only statement, but effort to intrude in the work of the court itself.
Yeah, and President Trump in his executive order has claimed that the ICC engaged in, quote, illegitimate and baseless actions targeting America and our close ally Israel. He also stated, quote, the ICC has no jurisdiction over the US or Israel, as neither country is party to the Rome Statute. Of course, this position has been maintained by both the Israel and Washington for a long time. So based on the Rome Statute, does the ICC have jurisdiction to prosecute Israeli and U.S. leaders for war crimes, even if neither country is party to the statute?
Under the Rome Statute, there are multiple ways to get jurisdiction over individuals who are suspected of committing crimes that arise under the Rome Statute. And one of the main ways to get jurisdiction is when crimes occur on the territory of a state party. And that's the situation that you have in the situation in Palestine. In the Palestinian occupied territory, you have a plethora of suspected war crimes, crimes against humanity. And what has happened there is that the court has taken jurisdiction over the situation, which means that it has jurisdiction over crimes that occur in that territory, no matter who commits them. And so this argument, and I'm going to call it an argument, has been rejected by the court itself and then by numerous and myriad international experts because of the way the Rome Statute was written.
Today, an American NGO is announcing that they are bringing a case before the ICC accusing former U.S. President Joe Biden and the former Secretary of State Antony Blinken of complicity in alleged war crimes and the crime of genocide in Gaza. In that case, would you think the ICC has jurisdiction to hear a case against the U.S., the former U.S. President and the former U.S. Secretary of State, and would it have the jurisdiction to issue arrest warrants as well?
So I wasn't aware of that, and I will look forward to seeing their referral if they've made it public or information about it if they have not. So I don't want to opine specifically on this, but what I will say is just like with the situation in Palestine vis-a-vis Israeli officials, officials from any government that might be found complicit could be brought before the International Criminal Court. It does not really matter whether they are parties to the Rome Statute or not. What matters is whether they could be found liable for a crime that would have taken place in a state party, including in the occupied Palestinian territory.
And what do you make of the allegation of several states, including France, Italy, and Hungary, for example, that they would not implement the arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu because he enjoys immunity under international law?
The question of immunity for heads of state has been an issue that has been directly addressed by the International Criminal Court. And it is, in fact, quite a clear obligation for member states of the ICC to effectuate arrest warrants, no matter what the position is of the individual sought. So it's actually not, it's not an appropriate way to view international law. It's a misunderstanding to say that someone should be immune from that kind of arrest warrant. One of the main purposes of the International Criminal Court was to ensure that no one would be above the law. And so even the highest level officials have the obligation to submit themselves to such an arrest warrant, and all the member states should be implementing those arrest warrants, no matter against whom.
And how should the international community respond to Trump's sanctions in order to protect the court? For example, there have been suggestions, including by the ICC president, that the EU should invoke the blocking statute. For example, other proposals were basically to bring charges of obstruction of justice against President Trump and other officials behind the sanctions based on Article 70 of the Rome Statute. What do you think of these proposals and suggestions?
It's very important that member states of the Rome Statute are actively taking steps to protect the court and its personnel. So I think it's a very important question. The first step I think many have taken, which was to put out a very strong statement defending the court and saying that the U.S. should withdraw its sanctions. I think the second step should be, in fact, to activate the blocking statute of the EU. I think that would be a very effective and appropriate next step. As for Article 70, It is true that the actions taken to sanction the court, if that happens, or to sanction court officials, such as has already happened with the prosecutor, would appear to fulfill the elements of Article 70 of the Rome Statute, which talks of obstruction or other ways of interfering with the administration of justice. And so I think it's something that needs to be very carefully addressed and reviewed legally.
And finally, we know that the U.S. Has played a significant role in the ICC's early development, but it has never ratified the Rome Statute. Recently, the U.S. has also supported a number of investigations, such as the Ukraine investigation. Do you think it's in the interest of the U.S. to engage with the court rather than undermine it?
I believe very strongly that it's in the U.S. interest to engage with the International Criminal Court. We have done so in the past, the U.S. government, and here I'm just speaking not as an expert, but as an American. And as an expert, I will say that what we can see is whenever states engage with the court and create a relationship where they're collaborating, where they're sharing information, where they are able to really bring to bear the kinds of evidence that states have concerning these forms of the worst crimes, it is very much in favor of the entire international system. So in order to end this kind of terrible crime, of crimes against humanity, of war crimes, of genocide, states must act together. It's simply too easy for individuals to escape across different boundaries or to find a hiding place unless states act together to ensure that there is no safe haven for individuals who are suspected of committing the worst crimes. The U.S. has for many decades been in favor of finding accountability instead of allowing impunity. And sanctioning the court is placing itself on the side of impunity, when what we need to do is ensure accountability for the worst crimes.
Thank you very much, Professor Satterthwaite. I appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, both as a UN expert and a law professor. So I appreciate your time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.